Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. The records room's sole purpose was to serve as a repository for information submitted by ninjas upon the completion or failure of a mission, rendering it one of the least visited sites in Konoha. On most nights, it was completely devoid of life aside from the family of rats that made their living off of whatever scraps were left behind by rare visitors. Tonight, however, the rats had a guest. A lone ninja had been wandering through the stacks of scrolls and the seemingly endless rows of books since before sunset, though now it was well after midnight. The small rodents trailed him silently, hoping to find some source of food he might leave behind, and they were not disappointed. The nin would periodically drop bits of breadcrumbs out of his sleeves, which the rats eagerly spirited away to the nearest of the many dark corners. Iruka turned back to the rats and minutely smiled. No reason to let them starve when I can help it, he thought to himself as he turned back to the stacks and returned to scanning through the dates of entry, or on occasion the names of those written about, that served as titles. He reached out and grabbed a particularly thin book, bound in simple brown paper. He read the TLE, opened it to the first page and finding what he was looking for, walked to a nearby chair to read. Hitaki Kakashi. Iruka began thumbing through the pages, reading over the general topics, and browsing about the names of his associates. While most of it was nothing he hadn't seen before, given that the copy nin's life wasn't a secret to most of the older Chunin, he was startled when he arrived at the point in the records that detailed Kakashi's early days as a special Junin. There's not much he hasn't been through, thought Iruka, training under the fourth, battling in the wars, losing dear friends and eyes. Then Iruka immediately stopped sifting through the book. He had come to the page concerning Kakashi's training methods, and the fact that none of his students passed their initial test, or became real ninja, ever. Iruka, sounded a voice, raspy with age. The Chunin almost jumped, but kept his calm and simply closed the book with a loud clap. He turned around to see Sarutobi emerge from the stacks of scrolls, carrying with him that ever-present pipe. Iruka, he repeated, what are you doing here of all places, now of all times? Iruka stood up, set the book down on the seat and bowed to the Hokage. I was reading Hokage-sama, said Iruka, almost sheepishly. How did he know I was here? An interesting choice of literature, said the old man, why so nosy about Kakashi? Or are you more curious about Naruto's new sensei? Iruka looked at the ground and nodded. I would like to discuss it with you if I may, said the Chunin. Kakashi being Naruto's new sensei, that is. Hummed Sarutobi curiously, what about it do you feel needs to be spoken about? Iruka looked back at the book on the chair and picked it up, opening it to the pages about Kakashi's training methods. Not one of his groups has passed, they're all sent back to the academy. I'm aware of this, said the old man, why does that concern you? Do you lack faith in your students? Not in the least, Hokage-sama, but I do lack faith in Kakashi. His methods are brutal, and almost psychotic. He pits them against each other and against him, and expects them to work together. Do you feel that you've failed to equip your students for such an encounter? Asked Sarutobi, eyeing Iruka closely. I didn't before, stammered the Chunin, but now I don't really know. Maybe, but even so, why should Kakashi be so brutal with students who are barely genin? Why should he go easy on them? Sarutobi continued to question Iruka. Naruto wants to be in my place someday, and you have never told him it was beyond him. You encouraged his dream, and now he faces the first real challenge to that dream. Do you feel that you've adequately equipped him to go chase the dream you told him he could have? Iruka was silent. Sarutobi turned to walk away, opening the package he still carried, then turned back to the Chunin, now several yards away. It's not too late for you to prepare him, Iruka. He may not be your student anymore, but he's still your friend. The third took a small loaf of bread out of the box, and resumed walking, tearing off tiny chunks and tossing them to the wooden floor. And I appreciate you feeding my rats, laughed the Hokage as he turned a corner and was gone. Not too late to teach him something. But what could prepare Naruto for someone like Kakashi? Thought Iruka, a squad of 10 genin would have trouble getting one of those bells and. Then it hit him, and Iruka stood up, and walked quickly out of the building. At a little before 2 a.m., Iruka stood outside a somewhat ramshackle wooden building, silently making his way from shadow to shadow. His usual Chunin vest was replaced by a black, loose-fitting suit, and a cowl that hid his face. He made his way to a window on the north face of the structure, and slipped inside unnoticed by the patrol that came around the corner only fractions of a second before. Once inside, Iruka darted from room to room like a shade, slipping by every TS wire and dodging every obstacle in his path. He had been here before, but rarely. Still, he remembered where every trap was laid, making them easy to avoid as he made his way down narrow corridors to the very center room. The door that barred his way was thick and held closed by no less than a dozen sturdy locks. But if there was anything that being a ninja of Konoha had taught him, it was that no room is impregnable. Iruka pulled a black scroll with ghostly thin, white letters from a slip in his sleeve and placed against the door. Biting his thumb and wiping the blood across the scroll, the Chunin stepped back as the paper slowly dissolved into the metal frame. There were several clicks, and the door swung open on well-oiled hinges, the locks undone and bypassed entirely. Inside, Iruka encountered almost total darkness, but it was easy enough for a ninja to tell that there was only one table in the room, on which sat a thick scroll. Strange, thought Iruka, no traps of any kind. He made his way towards the table, meeting no resistance, save when a rat scurried away to avoid being stepped on. Iruka reached out and took the scroll, and opened it up revealing to him all manner of jutsu, both hidden and forbidden. Having gotten what he needed, Iruka replaced the scroll and reset the locks, then slipped away, just as invisibly as he had arrived, dodging every trap, and leaping the outer court wall with the agility of a cat. Once outside, he leaned against the wall and relaxed for a moment. Hello, asked a familiar voice from a thicket of trees. The Chunin prepared to bound away, but hesitated when he saw the Hokage step out of the night. Sarutobi casually walked by the nin, and kneeled down to a small patch of grass beside the wall. A rat sauntered out haughtily, and the Hokage rubbed it behind the ears with his finger, and passed it a small chunk of bread from his sleeve. You've got to be kidding, thought Iruka. You know, Iruka, said the old man standing up, what you did in there was very illegal, and by law I should have killed you on sight when I saw you jump over the wall. Iruka slumped. He knew he would likely hang for this, or at least spend years in jail. And, continued Sarutobi, not showing any signs of anger or frustration, if it had been for anyone but Naruto, I would have. This time however, I didn't see or hear anything, nor did the friends I had tell you. The Hokage turned and walked away. Iruka was speechless. Oh, and Naruto is staying with the Yamanakas, so you should look for him there, said Sarutobi before he disappeared into the gloom. Iruka looked down at the grass. Two beady eyes looked back at him, watching his every move. The Chunin sighed, and dashed off in the opposite direction, towards the flower shop. It was just after 2:20 a.m. when Iruka arrived at the Yamanaka family home and business, so he couldn't simply knock on the door, everyone was asleep. So he elected to jump up onto a windowsill and peer in. To his amazement, Iruka's luck had held, and he saw Naruto laying on his back on the couch in the living room. Iruka took off the cowl and slid the window open just a little. Naruto, he whispered. No response. Naruto, he said only slightly louder. The blonde sat up in and stared bleary-eyed at his old teacher. Iruka-sensei, he asked, rubbing his eyes clean of sleep. What are you doing here? Naruto, come here for a minute, said Iruka, there's something I need to show you. Naruto got up and walked up to the window and Iruka stepped back onto the lawn and motioned for the blonde to follow, as he dashed off. Despite being tired and only in his shorts, Naruto followed Iruka, now awake entirely due to the cool night air. He caught up with the Chunin and they stopped in the academy schoolyard. What are we doing here? Asked Naruto. Iruka took out a hastily scrawled piece of parchment, and handed it to Naruto. Call it a graduation present, said Iruka smiling and forming the ram with his hands. That should help you later, he said, just before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Naruto was stunned, but looked down at the parchment. It depicted two hands forming a strange seal, and a brief description of a new way to mold chakra to form, cage buncheons. The blonde set down the parchment, and mimicked the hand positions it showed, then let some chakra flow around the seal, until he could feel the jutsu begin to take shape. He released the chakra, and said, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and instantly there was a puff of smoke beside him, that quickly revealed another Naruto. It was nearly dawn when Naruto approached the Yamanaka abode. The window he'd left through was still open, making him think that neither of the other residents were awake yet, but even so, as he approached he was still cautious to remain undetected. He had almost begun to trust that the Yamanakas didn't mean him any harm, or at least not Ino or her mother, but that didn't stop him from worrying what someone else might do if they saw him entering a house through a window. That wasn't a problem, however, as the streets were all but empty, the only other people being a tired shopkeeper or two, who were getting ready to open their store. So Naruto had no trouble slipping in quietly, and making his way back to the couch. He readjusted the bedding Mrs. Yamanaka had given him, plopped down, and was asleep before his head hit the pillow. A sizzling sound, and the smell of honey flooded the living room, waking Naruto from a restful sleep, and reviving him with a strong hunger. He got up, stretched widely and walked to the open kitchen door. Mrs. Yamanaka was in front of the stove, and Ino stood beside her at the sink. From the looks of things, the older woman was frying some kind of STS soaked in oil in a pan, and Ino was washing green beans in a strainer. Mrs. Yamanaka turned around, looked at Naruto, and smiled warmly. Good morning, sleepyhead, she said, you slept in a little bit. Ino turned around and greeted him with a quiet grin. Naruto stretched again and walked forward. Good morning, he responded, what time is it? Almost 9, said Ino, we need to be to the academy in an hour to meet our squad leaders, but we have time for breakfast if you'd like some. Naruto nodded, walked to the table and sat down, again smelling the honey but not knowing where the aroma came from. All that was on the table was a simple earthen vase housing a dozen white roses, and there was nothing around the kitchen that looked like honeysuckle, or a beehive. What's that you're cooking? Asked Naruto. Mrs. Yamanaka turned around, turning off the stove as she did, and tipped the pan so that he could see the 6 orange STSs that were now fried to a crispy finish. These are called aronerve, she said, and they make a wonderful meal any time, but especially at breakfast. Why's that? He returned, curious now. Well, first of all they smell wonderful, like honey and butter mostly. But they're also amazingly nutritious, high in all kinds of vitamins and minerals. And aside from that, they keep your skin in healthy condition. We've been having them for breakfast for almost 5 years now. Ino broke in, I'm a good cook, but it takes a lot of skill to make it right, so mother cooks it and I watch and try to learn. Mrs. Yamanaka picked up the aronerve with a spatula and put 2 STSs on each of 3 plates laying out, and Ino dumped a goodly portion of the beans beside them. The 2 of them each took a plate, Ino took 2, and set them on the circular table and sat down to eat. Naruto cut up the aronerve, and took 1 bite then stopped. This is delicious, he said with his mouth half full, it tastes like, well, something really good. Ino smiled and after she finished a bite said, it always tastes different to each person, and it can change depending on what you're in the mood for, but it's always great. I've normally thought it was like some combination of rice, sugar, and chocolate. Naruto grimaced slightly at the revelation of Ino's tastes, and took another bite. You know, he began, I really don't know what it tastes like, sweet but not really, but it has some kind of, well, he trailed off and began to mull it over while he ate. Maybe you just don't know what you like yet, said Ino, what do you normally eat? Ramen, responded Naruto. Okay, what else? Chicken-flavored ramen. No, I mean what besides ramen? Naruto was silent for a moment. I eat Ichiraku ramen a lot. You mean ramen is all you eat? Asked Ino, nearly stunned. Basically. The two slowly digressed into a conversation about all the different kinds of foods there were, with Naruto asking questions or mentioning there was a ramen flavor like that. Ino would then answer whatever he asked about food and herbs used for seasoning, and ask him questions about ramen. While one was speaking, the other was eating and listening. Mrs. Yamanaka, through the whole discussion, sat quietly and finished her breakfast, then got up and took the now empty plates in front of Naruto and Ino, who jointly said thank you then continued to talk. The older woman listened in with greater interest when the topic shifted to ninja arts when Ino mentioned soldier pills, and their uses. It surprised her how much her daughter had learned from the academy, and how well she combined it with the knowledge she gained in the gardens. The girl was already a skilled herbalist, rattling off to Naruto the ingredients for all kinds of poisons and their cures, as well as many more beneficial concoctions like energy drinks and pain cures. Naruto, on the other hand, while not in terms of plants and the like, was more book smart than people gave him credit for. Though he slept in class a lot, he was routinely throwing out obscure facts about the Hokages whenever it related to the subject. So, thought Mrs. Yamanaka, the boy who wants to be Hokage knows everything about his predecessors. Why am I not surprised? She smiled to herself and began to wash the dishes. When the topic changed to the fourth Hokage, Naruto began to take over the conversation, while Ino would ask questions about the Great Wars and such things. Naruto didn't have all the answers, maybe 3/4 of them, but when he didn't know he quickly filled in with his own speculations. Where did you learn this? Ino asked. When I was admitted to the academy, Naruto began, Iruka-sensei was the only teacher who would really teach me anything. He taught me to read, and gave me a book on Konoha's history. I didn't really like history, but studying that book was more time that Iruka would spend with me, so I street USD it a lot. It got to the point where I had most of the facts committed to memory, but I kept studying with Iruka, until somebody stole it. After that I just sort of got tired of school. That's horrible, said Ino. It's what happened, Naruto responded. They slipped into silence for a minute or two, until Mrs. Yamanaka cleared her tea, and nodded her head towards the clock. It was 5 till 10. Both of the 12-year-olds looked up, and nearly screamed. Geez, shouted Ino, hurry or we'll be late. SC. Naruto and Ino raced down the quarter-mile stretch to the academy, both praying that they would arrive before their new Genin instructors, or who knows what might happen. Naruto hopped the fence, followed quickly by Ino, and threw open the side door to the first-floor hallway. They both bounded in and Naruto said to follow him, as he opened another door that led into a stairwell. They ascended rapidly and burst out on the second floor, turned a corner, and dashed into a large classroom. There were 7 other young ninjas in the room, the other graduates from their class, all turned around and staring at them. They all synchronously looked up at the clock. Ino and Naruto followed the gaze. It was 1 till 10. They had made it with seconds to spare, literally, and went to the front. There they separated and went to their own teams. Ino took a seat next to Nara Shikamaru, while Naruto sat on Sakura's left, and waited for the last of the seconds before 10 to tick away. At 10 on the dot the door to the class opened, and a tall man smoking a cigarette entered. His hair was jet black spiked up, and held in place by a bandana. He shifted the cigarette around his lips and looked over the group, his scarred face hard and seemingly judgmental, while at the same time, adventurous. Team 9, he called out, catching Ino's attention, come with me. The 3 Genin stood up and walked towards him without question, and the 4 of them made their way from the room. Ino threw one glance back over her shoulder before the door closed, and the rest of the students lost sight of them. There was a moment's pause, and no one said a word. Kiba and Akamaru merely sat together, staring at the same point on the blank wall. Sasuke, as was his custom, glared off into space, despite Sakura's subtle attempts to get his attention, such as flapping her hair over her shoulder and nearly hitting him in the face, or loudly clearing her tea when it was obvious she didn't need to. Why won't he notice me? She wondered after several moments, slightly deflated. He better get his rear in gear or I'll put it there. Inner Sakura. Naruto looked around the room, glancing from face to face, grimacing when he saw Sasuke, and trying to think of something to do. He didn't wait much longer, as the door opened again right at 10:10, and a tall woman with glossy, unkempt black hair, and blood-red eyes walked in. Her dress was made of several STSS of white linen with black stays, and seemed to shift as she walked. Team 8, come with me, she said with authority, but not harshness. Hinata, Kiba, and Shino all stood up and began to walk to her. Hinata looked timidly back at Naruto, who smiled at her reassuringly. She gulped and pressed her index fingers together and proceeded out of the room, leaving the last 3, the members of Team 7, to wait on their instructor. They all waited in anticipation. Even Sasuke began to show signs of fretting, as the minutes rolled by. SC. Away in the treetops just west of the academy, Ino, Shikamaru, Chuji, and the man with the cigarette all sat on an especially wide branch in silence. The Junin was looking him over, and occasionally mumbling slightly to himself. Well, he finally said loudly with a smile, "My name's Sarutobi Asuma, and let me congratulate you on graduating the academy. That can be quite a feat, and not something I'm going to play down. You're all officially Genin now, which means you'll be recognized as adults in the ninja community. Again, congratulations. Now, I know your names and I'm sure you know each other's, but for the sake of being official and cordial, let's go around and introduce ourselves. You can add a personal goal or dream or something if you want. You start," he said, pointing at Chuji. "Me?" asked the somewhat hefty nin. "Well, I'm Akamiki Chuji, and I don't really have a goal other than to become a great ninja like my dad someday. I want to join the guard if I can." "Sounds good to me," said Asuma, shrugging and motioning to Ino. She was hesitant, but soon found her nerve, and bluntly stated, "I want to be the best kunoichi ever, even better than the Sannin, Tsunade. A steep goal indeed, but I don't doubt that you can manage it if you commit yourself to it fully," said Asuma. "How about you there in the net?" "What pretty clouds," thought Shikamaru, pleasantly in a daze. "Oh, for the love of," shouted Naruto, standing on top of a desk. "Where the heck is he? Our Junin should have been here an hour ago at the latest." The blonde plopped down on the desk, and simmered for a minute. "Shut it," said Sasuke calmly, "he'll get here when he gets here." "What did you just say to me?" asked an even angrier Naruto. "I told you to shut it," repeated Sasuke, folding his hands in front of his chin. "Yeah," said Sakura, "Sasuke-kun is right. But he better not be much later or I'll slug him so hard." Inner Sakura again. "But he's more than an hour late," shouted Naruto, pointing to the clock. Neither Sakura nor Sasuke responded, so Naruto began to pace around and try to occupy his time. After another few minutes, he grinned wickedly, and dashed up to the front of the room, drawing some measure of notice from his teammates. "This'll teach him," said Naruto, grabbing an eraser and sprinting to the door. Sasuke seed his head slightly off to one side. "What are you doing?" he asked as Naruto stuck the eraser up in the door, and closed said door just enough to hold said eraser in place. "Teaching him to be late," chuckled Naruto as he hopped down the stairs and sat in his seat. Sakura examined the trap, then sighed and muttered something about how stupid an idea it was, and how no real ninja would fall for that, just as footsteps began to echo just outside in the hall. "Sorry, said a man in a mask, popping his head through the door, and nudging it so the eraser fell on top of his head with puff of dust, a satisfying thump. Naruto began to laugh, and Sasuke stiffened with shock to the point that he nearly fell out of his chair. Sakura merely stood there not believing what had just happened. "Late," continued the man, acting as though nothing had happened, "but you see I was wandering this beautiful path to the academy, when I saw a rose, and couldn't help but stop to smell it. Well, it was an especially aromatic flower, and I simply got lost in it, and began to aimlessly wander the path in a delirium." Naruto was quieted instantly, let down by how the nin had seemingly been unaffected, while Sasuke quickly recovered his composure, and Sakura began to wonder if this guy could really even be a ninja, much less the respected Junin she recognized as the copy ninja Kakashi. He had silver hair that was spiked up, a mask covering his lower face added a great sense of mystery, and he hid one eye behind his forehead protector. He definitely looked the part, but falling for such a simple trap left Sakura needing some convincing. "Please follow me," said the nin, opening the door wider so all of them could pass through. Team 7 got up, and cautiously trailed the instructor as he led them down the hall. "That's Hatake Kakashi, something must be up if he walked into that trap like that," whispered Sakura to Sasuke, as they turned up a flight of stairs to the rooftop exit. There they halted. "Before you pass through this door, I want you to know," Kakashi said solemnly, "that numerous traps lie on the other side. You will be ninja the second your hand touches the bar, and as soon as you open it you will open the floodgates of numerous trials and tests. Some will praise you, and others will seek revenge upon you. Do you think you're ready?" Naruto, without a second's hesitation, shouted, "I'm going to be Hokage one day, so I'll have to learn to welcome challenges and trials." He barreled past Kakashi and the others, and threw open the door. He walked boldly outside into the sunshine, basking in the radiance of his first day as a ninja. There was a sudden whoosh, and Naruto looked up just in time to see a bucket of water topple from a perch above the door, tip upside down, dump him in its icy contents all over him, and blacken his sight as it fell over his face. The Kakashi standing beside the other two Genin disappeared in a large puff of smoke, and another Kakashi, the real one this time, dropped down seemingly from nowhere to take the clone's place. Naruto fumbled around for a few seconds, while Sakura began to laugh. Kakashi looked over at her, and shook his head. She stopped immediately and watched as he walked over to a still struggling Naruto. "We'll call it even now," said Kakashi, pulling the bucket off of the Genin's head. "That should teach you not to prank a Junin. He may just fall into it so he can justify revenge. Some Junin are really twisted and sadistic like that." Naruto just smiled sheepishly, half humiliated, half amused. He could tell by the slight upward twist in his sensei's mask that the Junin was not angry. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.